What if America had never set foot in Vietnam? No soldiers deployed, no helicopters flying over jungle canopies, no protests shaking college campuses. It may sound like a small shift in the vast timeline of the Cold War, but removing the U.S. from Vietnam changes everything. The economy, politics, global influence, and the cultural identity of a generation. Let's step into a world where America never entered the Vietnam War, and what that could have meant for the country. In this timeline, the U.S. government never commits troops to South Vietnam. Instead, American policymakers double down on economic containment strategies and political support, avoiding direct military confrontation with North Vietnam. Domino theory? Still feared, but direct intervention? Avoided. President Eisenhower's warnings remain just that, warnings. And by the time Kennedy takes office, advisors urge restraint, focusing on rebuilding America at home rather than fighting a faraway war in a jungle half a world away. Without the financial burden of Vietnam, estimated at over $1 trillion in today's dollars, the U.S. economy stays hot. The 1960s and 70s are defined not by inflation and budget deficits, but by massive growth. Infrastructure projects get more funding. NASA accelerates faster, possibly reaching Mars by the 80s. American manufacturing thrives without wartime inflation and resource diversion. The national debt grows slower, helping stabilize the dollar. More importantly, working-class families, especially minorities, benefit from uninterrupted Great Society programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and education funding. Poverty drops. College enrollment spikes. The American dream gets a boost. No Vietnam also means no military draft. No body bags on the evening news. No Kent State shootings. No disillusioned veterans returning home to a divided public. Instead of a lost generation haunted by war, the youth of the 1960s become a wave of innovation and civic activism. The civil rights movement gets even more momentum as attention isn't diverted by anti-war protests. Rock music still explodes, but it's inspired by hope, not despair. Without the war dragging his presidency down, Lyndon B. Johnson might have gone down as one of the greatest domestic reformers in U.S. history. His Great Society thrives. Democrats don't fracture over Vietnam. And Richard Nixon's rise to power? Much less likely. No war with no Watergate. The credibility gap never opens wide. Americans maintain more trust in government deep into the 1970s and beyond. Critics feared that not entering Vietnam would make America look weak in the face of communism. But in this timeline, the U.S. counters with smarter soft power. Diplomacy over firepower. Economic aid over military intervention. Support for emerging democracies across Asia. Countries like South Korea, Taiwan, and the Philippines still flourish, with American investment, not American boots. And without being bogged down in Vietnam, America is more prepared to respond to other global crises. Iran, Afghanistan, Latin America. The Cold War chessboard still tilts in the U.S.'s favor, only with fewer casualties. Without U.S. intervention, Vietnam reunifies under communist rule much earlier. But it doesn't trigger a global collapse like the domino theory feared. Instead, like China decades later, Vietnam slowly opens up to the world and embraces market reforms by the 1980s. Today, U.S.-Vietnam relations are strong anyway, proving the war may not have been necessary to secure peace. In this alternate reality, America avoids its most divisive war. The economy grows stronger, civil society remains more unified, and its global image as a moral leader shines brighter. No Vietnam War doesn't mean a perfect America, but it likely means a more prosperous, more trusted, and more focused one. Wars don't just change battlefields, they change everything. So next time you hear about Vietnam, remember, the war that did happen cost America dearly. But the one that didn't might have made all the difference.